Now, I want you to be patient with me for about 1 minute while I read you a story. Okay? I'm going to read you a story. I want you to pay real close attention to the story. Nekada su bila 3 mala prazeta. Nekada je bilo veliki loši vuk. Prvo malo praze je imalo kuću od slame. Veliki loši vuk je srušio kuću od slame. Drugo malo praze je imalo kuću od pruta. Veliki loš vuk je srušio kuću od pruta. Treći malo praze je imalo kuću od cigli. Veliki loš vuk je pokušao da sruši kuću od cigli, ali nije mogao. Now, everybody understands, right? Right. Okay, you don't understand. Now, I'm going to tell you the story again. Now, let's see if you understand. Okay? 3 mala prazeta. Okay? How do stories start, fairy tales? What's like,
Once upon a time.
Yes, once upon a time. Nekada su bila 3 mala prazeta. Nekada su bila veliki loši vuk. Prvo malo praze je imalo kuću od slame. Veliki loši vuk je srušio kuću od slame. Drugo malo praze je imalo kuću od pruta. Veliki loši vuk je srušio kuću od pruta. Treći malo praze je imalo kuću od cigle. Veliki loši vuk je pokušao da sruši kuću od cigli, ali nije mogao. Veliki loši vuk je pokušao da uđe kroz klinjak, ali treći malo praze je zgrabilo veliki loši vuk i stavilo ga u posudu za vijakom vode. Vuk je motav. How do fairy tales end? Yes, go ahead.
Happily ever after.
And they lived happily after. Treći malo praze je živjelo sječno I kud kasnije. Okay, so that was my story. Now, do you know what language that is, by any chance? It is Serbo-Croatian. Yes, yeah, Serbo-Croatian. So, when I first told the story, you didn't understand a word of it. Now you're beginning to understand it. What is it that I did to make it more comprehensible? What did I do? Okay, say more about those figures. Yes, those figures. In other words, I was using pictures. Wasn't I? Yeah. Do you know the story?
Yes, we do.
You do know the story. Okay, exactly. So you were able to figure out what the story was all about because you knew it in whatever language you know it in. And that is, we call this having the background knowledge to be able to comprehend. Is there anything else about this that you were able to understand?
The repetition.
Yes, the repetition.
The stone, the brick.
Yeah, and I kept using the word prazeta for pigs. Yeah, repetition.
And your mimics.
Yes, and I use mimicry, okay? Things of that nature. Yes, all right. Okay, you're beginning to get a picture of how we use teaching language to become more comprehensible. And so when children come to school and they know no language whatsoever, then they begin the process of understanding language through looking at pictures and seeing labels attached to pictures. Now, I did this very quickly, and I told you a story that you all know, but the process is similar to this. We rely on what our students know and understand in their first language, if they understand it. But if they don't, then we do things like putting labels on things and making our students more and more familiar. Okay, so there's that. But now the question becomes, well, okay, so we begin to learn language that way, but there is academic language. And academic language is a special kind of language. I'm going to try to give you a visual representation of what academic language might be. Now, take a look at this picture. There are two women in this picture.
Yeah.
Okay? Can you see both
Yes.
women?
Yeah.
There is an old woman and there is a young woman. Okay? It can be very difficult to spot what they are. Do you see the old woman here with her nose and her eyes? Okay? And do you see the young woman with her black hair and her nose here? You see it? Yeah? All right. Well, we like to describe academic language, the language of school, as combining language with content. And so content and language together then is what academic language is. But you see how difficult it is to see both of them clearly all the time? It's trying to separate something that you can't really separate. Academic language is the use of common language, but about talking about concepts, about ideas, about abstract things as well as concrete things. Let me show you an example of this. Content knowledge and academic language. If we were to just talk about content, then what we would say that something like this. A room measures 20 feet by 15 feet by 8 feet. What is the area of the room? Okay? And the answer would be by multiplying these three numbers to get the area of the room. But when we talk about academic language, we can measure it by this kind of an example. When measuring the room for wallpapering, would you figure out the diameter, perimeter, area, or circumference? And so what we have here is not the numerical answer, but rather, if I know how to figure this out, how to wallpaper a room, I need to either know diameter, circumference, area, or perimeter in order to figure out the answer. There is no numerical answer here. If you go back, we need a numerical answer here. But we're still using language, aren't we, in order to figure out what the answer is. Here, we don't need to know the numbers, but we need to know the words. And when we instruct our students, we try to make connections with the words and the numbers. And I'm just going to briefly show you this right here. This is a visual that shows how we grow the language proficiency of our learners. We try to find out, we try to instruct them in conversational language, in the language of language arts, or English or literature, of math, of science, and of social studies. And if you looked at the language of each of these subject areas, you would see a special language within a language. And so each subject has a language within itself. And we can take our students, and when they know nothing, and we begin to instruct them, we know that we can then begin to increase their level of knowledge of language from nothing to very high proficiency. And here's how we measure it. We measure it by attending to single words, then phrases and short sentences, then more language. Discourse means just kind of a chunk of language. Moderate language and complex language. So our students start at a low level, and as they increase, they get more and more sophisticated in their use of language in terms of the body of language. But then we also talk about how do they learn words. Well, we instruct them by using the most common vocabulary and right down to advanced and technical vocabulary. So we try to grow the language proficiency of our students with the amount of language, which is what this is, with the kinds of words that they're using, and then the grammar of sentences. And we have a very, this is the term that we used, anywhere from memorizing language. I remember when I was first studying to come to Brazil, it was como vai, vou bem, obrigado. E você, vou bem, obrigado. And I memorized that, as we all do when we're learning a first language, but then we're able to use it more and more accurately from a grammatical perspective. So this is how language grows. It grows from very little knowledge and use, and then as our students get more and more sophisticated, they have to know more and more academic language. Now, here's the thing. When students are at this low level of proficiency, they increase very quickly. So within a few weeks, a few months, within a year, they can get into this knowledge of language. But once they get into this area of proficiency, and here, and in here, they slow down, because see how much more language they need to know in order to demonstrate proficiency. And so whether you're at the first grade or the 10th grade, whatever grade, when you're engaged in language learning, you're going to, as you increase in the amount of language you know, there's more that you need to know. And it becomes increasingly, well, it just takes longer. It's not impossible, it just takes a little longer. And I'll talk about that in a second. So what we have here is kind of like a geometric increase in the use, how we acquire language when we're in school. But then there are all kinds of variables. Wouldn't it be nice if there was one magic way in which we could teach a language so that all of our students could learn? Well, it doesn't work that way. There are many variables. So the age that our students enter a U.S. school or an English-speaking school is going to be one variable. The degree to which a home language is used at home is going to be another variable. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, but if you speak a dominant language other than English, using that dominant language at home is going to help your students better than using English at home. Why? Because you're using the more complicated forms of a language you know best, and those complicated forms are what your child is going to pick up in the first language, and then when they come to school, they'll be able to transfer that complexity in their home language into the language of English. Many times what can be an issue is the social and economic level of families, but the one important thing that overrides this, and is so very important, is the degree to which parents support their children in education. You don't have to speak the language. You don't have to speak English in order to help your students learn English, but supporting supporting them when they're trying to learn the language is valuable. And I'm sure that all of you do that with your children. Sometimes when children don't go to school regularly, for whatever reason, this can impact learning a second language. There are differences between languages, and in school, in American schools, here's what we emphasize. We emphasize creativity, problem solving, and analyticity, the ability to analyze. This is what is fostered at a school like EAB, and this is a really good thing. But the degree to which this can happen depends upon if a child has been to another school in another country and has had a different kind of schooling. So for example, if a child goes to a school and just learns to memorize and doesn't engage in creative learning or in analyzing or in problem solving, it's going to be initially, it's going to be at first, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to engage in learning, but that can be overcome. It is just a variable. Children who have been read to in whatever language, or children who already know how to read and write in whatever language, really can progress very quickly. None of these means that a student can't learn. It's just what are the factors that help to make it grow quickly or slow it down. That's all it is. There are differences between English and other language. For me, I think the biggest challenge in learning as an English speaker would be to learn Chinese. I think you can guess why. It has a completely different script, it has a different way of writing, and the way in which the grammar is used is very, very different. There are many similarities between Brazilian Portuguese and English, but that said, there are also many differences as well. And so all of this mixture really makes it a little bit more complicated, but at the same time, what was easy for me in Portuguese? Eu estou andando, okay? Andando. So walking. Oh, it's the ing form of the word, and so that was easy for me. But gíria, gíria for me is very, very challenging. Anyway. This is probably not an issue, but sometimes children, when they go home, barely have enough time to study or to do their homework, and sometimes that can be an issue. And as I mentioned here, the attitude that families have towards education. Sometimes trauma can be an issue. If a child has witnessed violence of one form or another, or something traumatic has happened in the child's experience. What I'm trying to say here is this, that academic language and content are really close, and it grows geometrically, but how quickly it grows will depend upon a variety of different influences on their academic success. Now, to tell you this, usually it takes 1 to 2 years to acquire conversational English. Okay? 1 to 2 years. Now, what does that mean? It means the ability to hang out with friends. It takes anywhere from 4 to 7 years to acquire academic language. That's quite a difference.
These numbers are based on immersion.
These numbers are based on, well, again, there are all kinds of variations here, but what it means is the ability to operate at the same grade level with native speakers, it takes anywhere from 4 to 7 years. It just takes time. And this is one of the reasons why it takes time, as well as, I'm just going to go back here, as well as that geometric increase. Because in order to express proficiency at a higher level, there's just more language that needs to be acquired. So it takes time, okay? But guess what? The vast majority of students succeed. It just depends on how many years of schooling that they have and the degree to which, and I'll talk about some recommendations that I can make. Do you have any questions right now? Because all I'm doing is talking, and I want to, and thank you for that question. Do you have any thoughts or comments? May I ask you, please, what grade level your child or your children are here at EAB?
My son is in 2nd grade.
In 2nd grade.
Yes, and he has already done the test, and he tested with the WIDA.
Yeah, WIDA, yes,
and
yes.
His grade was 5.2, and the teacher told me that he will not need anymore do the test because he's almost fluent.
Yeah, let's just go back here. That's 5.
What's the meaning of that?
Okay, it means that he is almost at the level of native speakers in his use of English.
This grade, what?
These are just levels. This is level 1, level 2, level 3. That's all. That's all it is. Okay. All right. Thank you. And
we have a boy on K3.
Okay.
So he's just started to learn English.
Yeah.
And we thought this would be an opportunity to know what to do, like since the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay,
and I have some recommendations for you.
Right.
Yes. Okay. May I ask you what is your first language? What is your home language?
Portuguese.
Portuguese. Okay, you're Portuguese. Yes. How about you folks? Portuguese as well. Okay.
Yeah, actually, my children are in grade 5 and 8, but they speak English. They grew up in the US.
Okay.
Our home language is Dutch, though. So I'm more interested in the theory because for me it matters for learning Portuguese now. So it's
okay.
Right,
so you have
not,
another motivation.
No motivation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And what grade is your child?
The second.
Second grade. Yes. All right. And Portuguese?
Yes.
Portuguese. Okay. Good. All right. Thank you. And
my daughter, she's in 2nd grade.
2nd grade.
Our first language is Portuguese too.
Mm-hmm.
We talk. Half of family speaks Italian.
Oh, okay. So it's more than one language.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, in the United States, we don't recognize this, but it is so. I think it is so valuable. The more languages that anyone can be exposed to, especially children. That is what a gift that is, and so it is, I think, a very useful tool. So, all right, for all of you, what grade is your child?
4 and 8.
4 and 8. Okay, yeah. So you will see the expansion through the test if they're taking your son or your child will not be taking the test, but you will see that growth over time. The important thing to realize is it doesn't happen overnight. Academic language is associated with learning ideas, abstract ideas, and it is time consuming. So, all right, so let's look at this question. What can I do to help my child learn the language of school? All right, so in school, everyone speaks English. But at home, the recommendation is speak your dominant language. Don't worry about having to speak English to trying to support your kids. Speak whatever dominant language is that you have, because it's that wiring. We want to really create that complex wiring so that when they come to school, then when they engage in English, they're going to make that transfer much more easily. Reading is such an incredible gift reading to children, or conversely, let your child read to you. Both of those can be very, very useful, and it doesn't make any difference what language. Again, it's the use of language to help promote learning. Understand that there are two languages. Oral language. Remember what I said about oral language? It just takes 1 to 2 years to become conversant if you're using it all the time, but it takes 4, 5 to 7 years in order to become academically proficient. And this is important. Remember the variables I showed you about that impact how quickly or how slowly students may learn language? Students are going to experience challenges along the way. We all do when it comes to learning another language. And so, one challenge, and that's the first one, if they know no English whatsoever, it's going to be speaking. That is quickly and easily overcome. This is probably the biggest challenge over time, is writing. It's being able to use the words and the language of academic language, and to be able to do it in accurate ways. And then there is the special language of content. Now, you see those numbers right there? Mathematics. We have numerator, denominator, subtrahend, division, multiplication. You know, there's a whole list of things. That's common to multiplication, to mathematics. Science has its own language. Literature has its own language. All these different subjects have their different languages. So they're languages within languages. And the one thing I want to really stress here is that those challenges will be overcome through time. And through time, you will see that gradual progression and growth in your students. Now, with that, I'd like for us to look at the handout. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Okay, and much of this is a repetition, but there's some other things too. So you can take this home and just be aware of this. There are two kinds of language: oral language, conversation, and print language. Oral language usually takes 1 to 2 years. Print language, 4 to 7 years. And that means reaching grade level with native speakers of the language. That's what that means, that 4 to 7 years. Number 4, what you know in one language can be transferred into another language. For example, if you know how to read in one language, you can do it in another. If you know how to add in one language, you can do so in another. Okay? It's like learning how to ride a car. You get behind the wheel of a car that you learn how to drive, and then once you know how to drive, you can get into any car and drive that car. You know, some simple changes. It's that kind of thing. Number 5, a successful student. Okay, across the grades, the number increases and increases and increases, but a successful student understands thousands of words. So you can begin to see why it takes time in order to achieve academic success with language. And look at number 6. It takes approximately 10 to 15 times to see or hear a word before remembering it. That's a lot of exposure. That's a lot of times. And through the course of reading and using language on a daily basis in different subjects, it gradually helps to increase the academic language proficiency of your children. Number 7, it takes many more times to see or hear a word before being able to use it in speaking or writing. So number 6 has to do with listening and reading. Number 7 has to do with using the language. And so in other words, in order to speak it and especially to write it, you really need to know the language. And so the daily process of engaging in learning and using language day after day after day, year after year, begins to grow the success of your students. Number 8, one of the best ways to increase vocabulary is to read as much as possible. Remember I showed you a slide here, read to your children. Encourage reading in your children if they don't read. That can be a challenge today, as we know with technology. It can be a challenge. But don't discount technology, because technology involves a lot of reading as well. The issue there is more comprehending what you're reading and how you're using the language. Where are we here? Number 9. Students who usually do well in school read for fun as well as for studying. They read more than what their teachers give them for homework. That's all I'm going to say. And that can be a challenge to encourage your children to read. And number 10, remember that all students are AESL, Academic English as a Second Language. And that includes native speakers. They are AESL. Because for them, we're all in school, or they're all in school, in order to learn academic English. It's just that once they started school, they did so with 6 years living with their parents. Whereas your children have had fewer years because they were using their first language first. I would maintain to you that ultimately that your children will end up being better learners because of having more than one language. It is, I've seen that over and over and over. The issue is time. That's all it is. So here's what you can do. And this is just a repeat of what I said in the slides. Speak your dominant language at home. Read to your child in any language or have them read to you. Know that there are 2 kinds of language and both are different. And then just relax about the fact that your students will, your children will learn language and be successful in school. Do you have any questions? Are there any concerns that you have about what your children are doing in school? Have they said anything like that is, it's like, oh, this is hard, or things that they say, oh, this is easy? No?
I think that we don't have, I especially don't have problems because my daughter is here since she was 4 years.
Oh, 4 years old.
Yes.
Oh, no, then no problem.
Yes, now she's 8.
Yeah.
And it's different. But I have a doubt about other languages, as I was saying, because I'm worried about it because my daughter speaks Portuguese in home and she learns English here.
Yeah.
And we want to teach her other language. But we are afraid of because too many things to I don't know, because when we travel, because we have family abroad,
Sure.
when we travel, she speaks with cousins and other parents in dialect, even in dialect.
Wow.
Because there is a proper language every place. But we would like to know if it will cause some damage.
The answer is no. The answer is definitely no. And one huge reason, consistency. consistency in using Portuguese at home,
Yeah.
consistency in learning in school, because year after year she will be learning in English, is that correct? And there is even no problem learning another language in school, or going someplace and acquiring another language.
For vacation, with
For
family, no
vacation.
problem, but we would like to know if we put her on a school, a proper school,
Mhm.
for example, Italian school, to learn the language, to write, it will be a problem, it will cause some problem on English learning here.
No.
No?
No, it should not at all. In fact, the more exposure to different languages that
It's
a
better,
person has
yes.
is
I
better.
never heard about that.
Yes.
Yeah, it really
So
is.
it's
We
a
need the
two
opposite.
language is better.
Yeah, really, yeah. No, I would not worry about
It's
that.
easier to understand and learn another language if you know two languages, if you know three languages and go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many languages do you use? 3?
Well, home we use 2 because
2.
we speak. I would speak Dutch, but actually English has become the dominant language. So
Okay. Yeah.
So we sort of use Dutch and English at home. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the learning Portuguese, right? So, but,
I have a very good friend who grew up speaking French. He married a Vietnamese woman, and she grew up speaking Vietnamese. This is in the States. They married and they sent their children to school, American English-speaking schools. At home, he speaks his dominant language, French. At home, she speaks her dominant language, which is Vietnamese. Those 2 children are trilingual. It's consistency. It is an amazing thing to see. It just, really, it's amazing. Easier said than done, because to make that decision is one thing, and then to stick to it is another. Because when your child comes home using English, and you know English, and all of a sudden, if they associate you with knowing English and using English, they might try to push you not to keep using your dominant language. It all depends on the degree to which you want your children to learn a particular language or languages well. And I think it is one of the greatest gifts that we can give our children is the gift of language, both through talking with them on a daily basis, but also reading to them if we're able to. That was good. Thank you for that comment. Any other thoughts or concerns? No? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you.